So let's move on to our last section, which is political sensitivity, which kind of feeds into the last point about being polite. So this is the default expectation, really, from Chinese people towards other Chinese people and to foreigners coming here, that you would be sensitive towards the country, the culture, the political system. It's not really considered the business of a foreigner to come to China and to make comments about the political system or to criticize the culture or to criticize the country. In Chinese culture, it wouldn't be expected that Chinese people would go to your country and do the same thing. So really, that's exactly what I'm getting at with cultural expectations. Criticizing other people is something that is really reserved for specific formal settings. So you might be quite surprised at how blunt certain Chinese colleagues might be after a lesson observation or during a meeting to talk about your performance in some way. And that's because they have an official setting to share those ideas, and so it's accepted that what's being discussed is for the best of the students, it's for the best of the school. But out of the blue or just in general conversation to criticize someone or someone's culture or someone's country, or even just to be perceived to be criticizing them, and often to be misunderstood as criticizing, is very difficult to accept in Chinese culture. And if you add into that the language barrier that will often exist with you perhaps expressing some nuance in English, or expressing frustration at the way that something is done, it's very easy for things to be misconstrued and misunderstood. So it can really help you to try to be very sensitive when you talk about anything that could be construed as referring to all Chinese people, or referring to Chinese culture in general, or referring to the Chinese education system, anything like this. And this goes to a greater level when considering your audience and your platform. So who are you talking to and where are you talking to them? If you're talking at lunch, at your school, one-on-one with a friendly Chinese teacher who you know very well, who's in their 20s, has got very progressive views, then you can probably be quite forthcoming with your own views and your own opinions. But when the 50-something director of English sits down at your table, then you might want to reconsider exactly what you're talking about and the tone of what you're saying. The next thing is, are you on WeChat? Or are you writing a blog? Who's going to read that? So if you post something on WeChat, you need to be aware that WeChat is very, very good for sharing. So somebody can see a post that you've made on WeChat or a comment that you've made in a group, and it's very easy for them to take that comment out of context, take a picture of it and share it. And before you know it, maybe your students or teachers at your school have seen it. So it's important that you be careful, you think about who your audience is and where the things that you're saying could end up. Consequences, it may sound like I'm really laboring the point here and perhaps describing something that's very unlikely to happen, but there are real consequences for being insensitive to the political situation in China and not being careful about where you share things and what platform you share things on. So I can give two clear examples of this. One is a teacher who posted WeChat comments to his moments about the Chinese political system, the state of education in China, and he also made some complaints about access to VPNs in China. And this guy ended up losing his position because these comments were shared with the students. The students then shared them with their parents, and they got back to the school, and eventually the Education Bureau became involved, and his visa was eventually cancelled. The important thing to realize here is that this teacher shared these comments directly with his students, thinking, it's fine, I can do this. He may have just been letting off steam. He may have genuinely wanted to undermine the Chinese system, but whatever he was intending to do, at the end of the day, he did the most damage to himself. He lost his job and he ended up having his visa revoked. Another example is a teacher who traveled to Tibet, and whilst in Tibet used their mobile phone to send text messages and also sent emails complaining about the situation that they saw in Tibet. This person ended up being deported and also losing their job. So, the important thing here is that two teachers spoke about very, very sensitive topics, one being the Chinese political system and another being Tibet. And you'll often hear people advise that you don't talk about the three T's, the three T's being Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen. But there are other topics that you should also steer clear of, as I've explained in this video. A final point on political sensitivity. I would always encourage people to try to understand the situation in China, to try to imagine what over 1 billion people means and how there is just one government trying to control this huge country with this massive population. I didn't come to China to judge the way that the country is run. I came here for a challenge, for an adventure, for an interesting experience. And I believe that most teachers are coming here for that as well. And I'd encourage people to learn what they can and try to understand the country and the culture before they move to say whether it's good or bad. And I'd be happy to sit down with you and have a conversation about it if you want to talk to me about it. But I really encourage you to try to be as sensitive about these issues as you can, because it will only help you in the long run. Okay, so that's the end of our talk on laws and political sensitivity. Next, we'll be talking about health and safety in China.